We are back with more previews for the DNVR Avalanche for the 2021 season. We've talked about young guys, we've talked about old guys. Let's talk about some of the guys with the least NHL experience coming into this season. With the caveat, of course, these guys might actually play in the NHL this season. At least there's a chance. Why beat around the bush? Let's start with the name everybody wants to hear. Bowen Byram. At the WJCs currently, this is a guy we've talked about all offseason as having a legitimate chance to be an everyday player in the NHL this year.
Watching him at WJCs is really just affirmation of the fact that he's done.
Yep.
There's nothing left for him. There's certainly nothing left for him in the WHL. There's nothing left for him in his peer group at that level, at that caliber of play, that level. He's ready.
Just to confirm that, we have his WHL stats from last season here. And, a defenseman put up over a point per game with 14 goals.
And you consider the slow start that he had.
Yep.
And he just casually puts up a point per game.
No problem.
There's nothing for him at any level other than the NHL anymore. Even the AHL at this point would be... if they give the 1 year exemption or whatever, because the WHL may not play, and he's eligible for the AHL, so what? He belongs in the NHL. He's an NHL player. For my money, he's the best defenseman in the world, not in the NHL.
I would agree. It feels like even the AHL should be beneath him at this point.
Yeah, like the AHL would be a fine backup option if something else happens. Say, he gets back from WJCs, he has to quarantine. In the meantime, Conor Timmins has completely gone off the rails and is dominating, and it's like, well, we have to play this guy in the NHL, and he's playing really well, and they just have to let that ride. That's the only situation where I can see something like that happening. Otherwise, this guy needs to be in the NHL. There's nothing really at any other level for him.
And this is coming from the DNVR guy who isn't as big of a believer in his ceiling.
Yeah, I've always kind of been a little bit lower on where he ultimately projects as an NHL player. I don't know that he's an all-star. I don't know that he's a true top pairing guy. I don't know. We'll have to see. Offensively, he's so different than the other guys that he's going to be competing with jobs for. Even Makar, Gerard, even Devon Taves. He's just so different. He attacks in a way that those guys don't. And he's always attacking.
A, B, A, always B, B, A.
Attacking.
Yep.
Always attacking. The way that it used to drive some fans crazy when Tyson Barrie would get out and be at center ice, even with one of his forwards because he just flew the zone the second they got the puck. Be prepared. Because Bowen Byram is going to be that guy again. The only question is will his defense be that much better? I think the answer is certainly better than Barry's. Yes. Will the offense be that explosive? It has the potential to be. Defensively, where he ends up in the NHL will ultimately determine his ceiling. Because offensively, he's got all the tools to be a 50-point guy. I don't know that he'll get the power play opportunity to get there, because you don't really see 50-point defenders in the NHL without power play, without lots of power play opportunity. But he has the tools to do it. And the guy has everything, theoretically. Where it ends up, we'll see.
So that when we look at his path to the NHL is essentially right now as this video releases. Whatever his WJCs are at this point will be what they are. He's going to carry that directly into training camp / practice / whatever it is once he gets out of his quarantine period. And there's a really, really good chance he at very least gets his 7-game tester.
Yeah. I think it'll be 6 games. Seventh game means they've kept him.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think there's still a really good chance he gets to 7 then. But
I certainly agree. I think he's probably an Av this year. I think he's a full-time Av by the end of the year. The guy, He's showing a WJC's why he's ready for the promotion. And I think the big difference between him and some of the other guys is that physically he's good to go.
Yep.
He's 200 pounds.
Yep.
He's built. He's ready. He
handle
can
it.
handle it. That's one of the biggest factors when we on draft night. One of the things that you hear said about nearly every single player, he's got to get stronger. He's got to physically mature. I mean, you're talking about teenagers here going into the ultimate grown men's league. Yeah, he's got to grow. He's got to grow into his body. He's got to do all this. He's got to bulk up. Byram's there. He's 200. He's probably 205 pounds by now, and it's not like he's 5'10". So the guy is physically ready. His on ice ability, he's ready. There's nothing stopping him. The only thing that has a question mark is the fact that he's in the weird position of being an elite defensive prospect on a team with a really good defense already. That's not a combination that happens very often.
Yeah, for Byram, if you want to check him out, I am doing a tape on all of the Avs WJC prospects once the tournament is over, so you can get a little hype on him there. The big question for Byram, really, then, I guess, the NHL role. What is his expectations in the NHL this year, since we've talked ourselves into him being an NHLer? And it's the rookie role. You get on the third pair, they shelter you, let you do your thing. If you earn more, you earn more.
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest, there isn't much of a path to more minutes than that for him this year. You look at Eric Johnson's not going to play 16 minutes a night.
Yeah.
Cale Makar, Sam Girard, Devon Taves. They brought Devon Taves in to be a top 4 guy. Those other 2 guys are already 20 minutes a night. Now the Avs balance their D pairs a little more than most other teams in the NHL. But even with that considered, Byram, I can't see Byram being much more than 16 minutes a night or so.
Yeah.
That he's a lot of those
scratch and claw for every minute for sure.
Definitely. A lot of ozone starts and him playing next to an Eric Johnson or an Ian Cole, a veteran that they can kind of settle him down a little bit, be more of a defender while he gets to stretch his legs offensively. Easy to see that's where they use the veteran guys this year.
Yep. So let's look at his counterpart then. You already mentioned it. There's a world where Conor Timmins goes off and earns himself an NHL roster spot. A lot of conversations about him, obviously, plenty of concerns as well. But start with his AHL statistics last year. When the dude is on the ice, he is very good at hockey, it turns out.
It's productive everywhere he's ever been. It's not always pretty. It's certainly not always highlight reel caliber, but he just consistently finds his way to points.
Yep.
At some point you stop looking at it and saying he's getting lucky or, he's just falling backwards into this. Like Ian Cole having a career year last year, loading up on secondary assists where all he did was just like dump a puck into his zone and somebody went and retrieved it and made a great pass and they score right away. Like that's luck. That's something that you're saying, okay, well, that's not going to be repeated. Every level Conor Timmins has played at, he's produced offense.
Yep. Every
single level. To think that he's going to show up in the NHL and it's like, oh, now he's a 15-point player. No. He's really, really smart. And he's a guy that ignites breakouts with how he plays because he reads the ice as well as he does. He kickstarts a lot of transition game. Guess what Colorado's really good at? The transition game. So while there are, his skating is really the biggest thing keeping him from being just another Avs defenseman because he's nowhere near the caliber of skater that Taves, Girard, Makar, Byram. He's not one of those skaters. Even Eric Johnson, he's not that kind of skater. He's way more of a Ryan Graves type of skater where it's very clearly his big weakness. But he's such a smart player that most of the time it just doesn't matter.
Yep. And that's exactly what you design his NHL role around. You don't worry about the skating. You don't try and force him to use that in ways that he just simply can't. You put him in an NHL role where he can be smart, use his head, play hockey the way he knows how to play. And the reality of it is, as we've gone over with a number of defensemen in these videos so far, the dude's not going to get power play time. So
Yeah.
he's going to have to probably work on the PK side.
I think he can help that unit. It's funny because a lot of these guys we talk about, when Eric Johnson and Ian Cole are gone, which of these guys are gonna do that?
Yep.
Until Justin Barron and Drew Hellison show up, which of these guys who have all been known more for their offensive profiles than anything else are going to be able to take on that role? I think Timmins is a great fit. He's such a smart player that reading the ice won't be difficult for him. And I think that's an area where we've seen them struggle, is that they get the classic defensive defenseman, but his big thing is they couldn't, some of these guys have struggled in being able to play in more organized settings in their own zone. They've gotten a lot of guys that are good defenders in transition, break up plays at the blue line.
How many
stop
dudes
offense
can't
before it ever
defend
gets
that
started?
Sure, yeah.
But being able to, the net front defense, it's not enough to just be big.
Yep.
It's not enough to be like, I'll crush you in open ice. Great, that doesn't help you on a PK.
If that dude's 4 feet away from you, you can't crush him.
You need to have a good active stick, which is where Timmins excels defensively, is that he's very disruptive with the stick. Again, reading the play at a high level, he puts the stick into passing lanes. He's going to be a guy that could be very effective on the PK if they just feed him those minutes. Now, again, that happening this year, he's kind of in no man's land, right?
Yep. So it's just kind of the reality. His path to the NHL also kind of includes his big question as a player this year. He's probably going to need injuries to happen to realistically make the roster unless something crazy happens. Because as Joe Sakic has said himself, Conor Timmins, they want to see him be healthy. And that's the expectation, is he will start the season AHL or taxi squad, whatever. But he needs to stay healthy and prove that he can be healthy before they want to test the waters in the NHL again.
The big problem with the taxi squad is that it doesn't help him.
Yeah, right. He's not playing games on a taxi squad, right?
The one thing that he has to prove is, can he stay healthy through the physical rigors of pro hockey in North America?
Yep.
Him playing in the AHL is the only way for him to prove that he can stay healthy. I don't even care how he plays. Just go out there and stay healthy, dude. Don't go get hurt.
What?
Because right now you kind of wonder, like, where does he fit on this year's roster? It's hard to see an exact spot for him next year, given the offseason that they're going to have, between expansion, between Ian Cole's free agency, big question marks with Eric Johnson and all that. You can see, okay, some roster spots might open that open a clearer pathway. But this year, right now, I mean, especially with Bowen Byram being where he is, where it's mostly NHL or bust for him, I think it would be fair to say that Byram has jumped him in the pecking order, and that he's going to get opportunity before Timmins, which just clouds Timmins' path that much more. He needs guys to get hurt.
Yep.
Which is a weird thing to say.
It's part of the reality of trying to break into the NHL, especially for not ultra high-end prospects. That's not to say Timmins isn't high-end, but he's not top of the first round caliber like a Bowen Byram is.
Right. I mean, look, none of us have ever talked about Conor Timmins as a top pairing defender.
Yep.
Like, he's always been a quality prospect. I really liked him in his draft year more than half of the NHL, apparently, and thought he was a mid-first round guy. But even then, you're not talking about a top pairing prospect. He doesn't quite have the physical ability to go with that. But he is absolutely a guy that should play a top 4 role. If he maxes out his game, he's going to be a really good and effective NHL player for a long time.
All right, let's talk about some forwards. Martin Kaut. Bums. I don't know about. No one's going to like that if you're calling Martin Kaut a bum.
Martin Kaut, it's not allowed.
except for that he's not expansion draft eligible. You're allowed to say that.
It's basically my brand at this point.
9 games in the NHL last year that were fantastic. That's the key I want to focus on, because when we bring up these AHL statistics, not amazing. It's fine. It's not bad, but you don't look at those and go, wow, for Martin Kaut. What sells you on Martin Kaut is really 6 of his 9 games in the NHL were, why isn't this dude full-time in the NHL? And then the other 3 were decent to good.
They were, look, you always need, one of the things about the 9-game trial is that it gives teams usually an opportunity to see what they have in a player when he's not at his best.
Yep.
And that's a big part of the equation for coaches and getting young guys in the lineup. They want to know what they have to live with when a guy's not firing on all cylinders. He's not going that night. He's not very good. And with Kaut, what we saw when he was not an impact player was really encouraging. He still plays a smart game. He's still good along the wall. He's still decent defensively. There's a lot of encouraging things that even when he's not playing with a ton of jump, and it's not, the offense just isn't popping for him that night. And as a guy that doesn't have like a super high offensive ceiling, there's going to be plenty of those nights. He was still an effective NHL player, and I think that was the most encouraging thing. Look, for a first round pick to come into the NHL and look good for a couple of games isn't a story.
Yep.
But for him to be effective and for him to be a decent and quality option when he was not playing at his best, that was the story. That was the thing that I think convinced them to say, okay, we're done with 9 games. He's so far down on our pecking order because of the offensive depth that they had last year that it was like, look, we want to save this contract. The ZLC is going to be really important for us in a couple of years. We want to keep this guy less than $1 million for as long as we can. And now that they have that, now that the ELC is no longer a consideration, go get a job, kid.
Yep. And I think he proved his NHL role that we have for him in that call-up pretty easily. I guess it was technically across a couple call-ups, but you saw a very capable, at his best, middle 6 forward, and certainly a third line forward for all 9 games.
Absolutely. Scored a goal on the second power play unit. That's absolutely where he should be slotting in as well. Is a very smart and capable passer. It will not be an overwhelming goal scorer. Doesn't have an incredible shot or anything like that. Is a good all-around offensive player. Again, the smarts, the vision, the creativity won't overwhelm you, but it's consistent and it's good. And we've seen him at every level when he gets put next to higher level players, his level goes up.
Yep.
He's a perfect complementary player in that he just fills in the gaps wherever they need to be filled. He does whatever job he needs to do on a line. If he needs to be more offensive, he can do that. If he needs to be more of a complementary guy, a distributor, because he's playing next to more dynamic guys, we saw one of the big reasons he got drafted in the first round was because of a WJC performance next to Martin Netchus and Philip Zadina.
Feed those dudes.
Yeah, he just fed those guys. That line was awesome at the WJCs, and he was the glue guy to it. He's not the third banana like Martin Firk was in Halifax next to Drouin and McKinnon. He was a legitimate part of that, of their success as a line. And I think that's where you see, when you also talk Ryan Graves and better with better players. I think Kaut is a guy that he was good in the AHL last year. He's going to be a guy that will be better in the NHL because he's going to be next to better players, which brings out the best in him.
When you get a player that is that reliable at that young of an age, there's a lot of value in that. You already mentioned his ability to fill gaps, but to be able to put a young player out on the ice like that and not worry about consistency, it's real easy to find a spot for a guy like that.
It should be. But again, the Avs just a touch too deep right now. Where he, at best, right now, he's their 13th forward.
and that his path to the NHL, there's an argument that he's not even going to be the 13th forward, probably a pretty good one that we'll get to in a second. Someone's got to get hurt for this guy to give a chance. And I tell you what, depth Avs players, they're not going to want to get hurt this year. They're going to try to stay on the bench, because if you're a depth forward for the Avs, there are people coming for your job.
There's a very good the Wally Pipp factor this year is really high.
Yep.
There's a good chance that a guy, if he gets hurt and Martin Kaut comes in,
he ain't coming back in. Yeah.
Unless it's one of those top 6 guys, you might just lose your job.
Yep.
Like it's weird. It's weird to think that, like, if a Jonas Donskoy gets hurt, he wouldn't be allowed back in the lineup. But if Martin Kaut comes in and does the same job at the same level for a quarter of the price,
hard to say no to that.
Yeah, I mean, are you going to upset that apple cart? I mean, I'm sure that they would find some spot for a Donskoy, right? Like, I'm sure.
Yep.
But these fringier guys, Belmar, if Belmar's not playing the way that he needs to, they've got a couple of different center options they could go with. But obviously, Tyson Jost, the man on the bubble right now.
Don't ruin our bottom 6 hot takes video yet, AJ. All right, we got a whole nother video for that. The next guy who is also coming for those jobs is Logan O'Connor, a guy who won a lot of hearts and minds last year, not only in the regular season, but in his stint in the playoffs as well. Certainly an extremely hard worker. Has that almost factor. That's not what you call it, AJ, but it tries real hard, gets real close, even though a lot of the time there isn't really any chance for him to actually win a puck.
Yeah, he the TJ Tannen corollary.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the thing with the LOC is that to the eye, it's all good. He looks like he's trying really hard, and he is a really fast skater. He throws the body. He's very obnoxious. He's got kind of horse mouth going on, where it's very easy for him to pop out that mouth guard and, like, show off the pearly whites and show how happy he is to be smiling in that guy's face after he just got face washed. He's just that guy. He's got the most punchable face, which you always want on your team. And it's all of this adds up to great depth guy. He was a great find, undrafted kid that has played a huge role in the AHL, and his numbers have been really good. He's been a more productive AHL player than he was in college.
Yeah, his AHL statistics, his second year, they were honestly down, but we have those, and even those are very, very solid for the Eagles last year. So, pretty impressive stuff for him. 25 points in 40 games. You can't ask for anything more out of the guy at the AHL level. He's done everything he needs to do to prove that he should be in the NHL.
Yeah, the big thing is that quality of players around him looking for jobs as well. Not just Martin Kaut, but Shane Bowers behind him. That's going to be an issue. I think when we talk about who Colorado's 13th forward is, it's really dependent on which guy gets hurt. Because if it's the top 6 guy that gets hurt, you're not necessarily putting LLC in the lineup. You might just drag and drop Martin Kaut. If it's Matt Calvert that gets hurt, LOC is the perfect guy to drop into the lineup in that role. So it's, he's going to be an interesting fit for them. The real question is will the offense ever justify? Will it ever be good enough to justify playing him every single night? Because
he needs to not fall into the Sheldon Dries ravine, where he's shown well in the NHL so far. He's picked up a couple of points, but if they give him a long look and he ends up not being able to produce at least to some consistent level, it just falls apart really fast.
More than Sheldon Dries, the guy that I always come back to, where it's like, this is who this guy could absolutely max out as, is Gabe Bork.
That's fair.
Where, he just couldn't. He was a good PKer. He was a good skater. He worked really hard. He was good in the locker room. Very coachable. Fully bought in. Had everything you could ever ask for from a role player. He just wasn't quite good enough offensively. And you just can't have black holes like that on your forward core. No guy is good enough defensively to justify 8-point seasons.
Yep.
You just can't be that inept offensively.
Not in the modern
There has to
NHL.
be more punch there.
Yeah.
And, with O'Connor, we've seen he's got 21 NHL games played. He only has 2 goals scored. Granted, he's only averaged 8 minutes of ice time in those 21 games. Last year, he averaged 8:26 in 16 games in which he scored both of those goals. Now he's averaging about a shot per game, so that's good. He's firing pucks. He drives a little bit of play. Defensively, he was very good in the AHL. We'll see how it translates to the NHL, because right now all we're talking about is really small sample sizes of this guy.
Of course.
So it's hard to project too much. But his real big question is it going to be that much better in the NHL?
Yep. Look, this is a guy where I'm not sure what the long-term outlook is for him. Can he carve out a successful role for himself in the NHL if he reaches the ceiling? Absolutely. Can he do it with a should-be cup-contending Avs team? Might be tough.
His archetype honestly just left because he's very Matt Nieto-esque.
Yep.
The only question, if he can produce 20-point seasons like Matt Nieto, he'll stick.
For sure.
Somewhere in the NHL, he'll stick. It may not be, the Avs might end up having to do with Nieto or with O'Connor as the Sharks initially did with Nieto, where they just put him on waivers because their roster was just too deep at the time.
Yep.
And that was, how Nieto came to be an Av. And now he's back with the Sharks because he had a really good Avs career. The same kind of path could be true for O'Connor, where he might just, but there are too many good young players coming for these jobs in the next couple of years that even if O'Connor carves out a job, it may not be a Colorado thing for him.
100% agree with that. His path to the NHL at the moment is honestly the same as Martin Kaut's.
Someone's got to get hurt.
Yep. Straight up. He and Kaut are essentially battling for the 13th forward spot instead of being on the taxi squad, or maybe they just keep their 13th forward on the taxi squad, whatever. Either way, one of them will be the first forward call-up, and they'll get their opportunity. And like we said about Kaut, either one of these guys, there's a very decent chance that if they get a job, they ain't giving it back. Those are the rookies that realistically have a shot of playing significant NHL time this season for the Avs.
The one guy that's kind of on the outside looking in right now, but could absolutely end up somewhere in this mix is Shane Bowers. Yep.
Shane Bowers probably has a little bit further to go, but if centers go down, that's someone they'll probably look at. Ultimately, the Avs have ridiculous depth, and the fact is that these rookies are coming to help that depth certainly next season, if not this one. So always fun to look forward to. AJ and I particularly big prospect guys, but this was a bit of a longer preview, nerding out on the prospects as we love to do. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. Always a great time. I think I already mentioned the tape for Bowen Byram. Go look at that over on the DNVR.com. Back with NHL roster players on the next preview video.